care and learning, which is huge for me. I was just having a great discussion here about the $10 a day plan, which I was hoping that Sharon Grayson would come and speak to, but we also have a problem with childcare and people that are paying $1,200 to $1,500 a month for their childcare. So yeah, it is shame. It's unacceptable. And people are actually in this riding and going out of the riding to North Vancouver, West Vancouver, Strathcona to take their children because they cannot have their children within this riding and afford the childcare. So the fact that we want people to move in and we're working on that density, we need to make sure that those community amenities are there for the people that are moving into this riding, as well as respecting the people that have been here for years and years and years. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask folks to post, or as Diane said, next time we're going to have bigger pieces so that we can actually read them from there. I know, because the ones I started out with were about this big. So we're going to put these up, and this really gives all of us an idea of what is important. We group them together. I can take them back, look at the platform, talk to the party, and say this is what we're hearing is really, really important in this riding, and this is what we need to address. So we're going to do that. There's food, there's pizza, water, pop, fruit, sweet, chocolatey, little brownie bites. That I couldn't help buying because I love them. And we're going to have you help yourself to that as well as listen to some speakers. So I'm going to invite my dear friend Judy Grace up to speak, and I'm so grateful that even though she's retired, she's not really retired. I don't think it's possible for Judy Grace to retire. And I have great admiration for the work that she has done. And sadly enough, I try not to talk too much about my dad, but a lot of the issues that my father fought for are still here. They are still relevant, and they still need to be fought for. So that is my goal, is to continue on that fight, and knowing that he would want that. People like Judy Grace have done an amazing job with housing and homelessness and all of those issues that are very dear to her heart and mine. So we'd like to welcome Judy to come up and say a few words. Thank you for bringing your little puppy Bab. We love Bab. Yay.
If Bab's too full, she looks for Constance.
I'll give you a pen.
I am so glad to be here today. I want to tell you why I am so excited that Constance is running. Where do I even start, right? My whole life is dedicated to the idea that everyone in Canada should have the basics of life. And I think that everybody in this room shares that. We all need clean water, whether we're living in the city, or whether we're living on reserves, or whether we're living near a place where they're fracking. We need clean water. Everybody in this country needs nutritious food. We are one of the wealthiest nations on earth. And yet, when we look around our city, we're seeing people who still don't have that very basic nutrition. And because they're lacking that, the poor are developing diabetes. The poor are using up so much hospital time because when they develop an infection, they have to go into the intensive care. And what is happening there is they're spending 6 weeks in the hospital, basically getting enough nutrition into their body that the antibiotics can take effect. I would be in there for 3 or 4 days. They're in there for 6 weeks or longer. Every person in Canada needs a basic little place that can be clean, that is safe, that has a lock on the door, that they can consider their own with the doesn't have access to adequate hygiene. He's not able to launder. He's not able to have the showers he needs to keep his body clean. He is not getting the medical care that he needs. He is not housed. And it's very, very difficult to give anybody water, hygiene, food, and safety unless they have housing. In this riding, which used to be a relatively well-to-do riding, we have people living in terror. All of us know people who are now in their 70s who spent their lives doing all the right things. They worked, they were industrious, they led in their occupation, they saved their money, their nest egg before they retired. But at 1%, 2%, and 3% interest rates, they cannot continue to pay their rent. They're going quickly through their savings, and they're living in terror. They're losing their will to live because they don't know where they go when they've run out of money. The rents in this neighborhood are going up fast. There was a federal dream that every Canadian would own their own home. Well, that was very unrealistic. But since the late 80s, early 90s, the federal government has changed the way that they tax construction and the way they tax housing, so that all of the benefits have gone to the condos and the building of houses and have been taken away from the building of rental housing. So there has been almost no rental housing, and I'm talking market housing here. I'm talking regular, owned by a landlord, rental housing. Almost none has been built since the late 1980s. All the way across Canada, we're seeing homelessness. Every municipality is seeing homelessness because we live here, we see it most readily when we do our homeless count, and we find homeless people living in the street in North and West Vancouver. In Vancouver, the count is done on the same day throughout Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley. So we know that every community, every municipality between North Vancouver and Hope has homeless people in it. The people that are in power right now believe that if we begin to run out of money, that if people don't want to be homeless, they just have to move out to the suburbs. It's not working. The suburbs can't cope with the homeless that they have right now. We didn't have homelessness in Vancouver, not in Vancouver Centre. That was absolutely unthinkable in 1990. So I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but anybody who is in this room who was conscious, right? So I would say 18 years old or over, right? In 1990, well, remember that when you came down to shop at the Bay, there was nobody sleeping on the sidewalk. There was no panhandling because there were other ways for people to get that money. There was nobody sleeping in the mini parks. There was nobody, you know, we had shelters, and people would come into shelters, and then we would be able to relocate them into something that was a real place to live, right? But the federal government, both the Liberals and the Conservatives, cut the funding to subsidized housing, about what can I do to help? I thought I was the only person in Vancouver who didn't understand why they were homeless. But then I discovered that even City Hall didn't know why there was homeless. And at first, my time in the streets trying to resolve homelessness, you and bring you inside. My boss said, no, that's not actually your job. If you want to do that as a hobby. Right? So I did it as a hobby, and I started going out later and later in the evening, and I started doing it in the middle of the night, because that's the most effective time to find a homeless person and say, what happened? Tell me. And so 2 years of going out at night, I had learned more than pretty nearly anybody in Vancouver about causes of homelessness. And by trying to resolve it, I learned that the system that resolves rental problems was evaporating in our city. And I was asked to do a report for mayor and council, and after that, this became part of my job. First off the corner of my desk, and gradually taking up my whole desk. So that's how I know that what is happening in Vancouver and in Vancouver Centre has happened across British Columbia, across Alberta, across Manitoba, right throughout the country. It has happened all through the United States. These horror reports that we're getting now out of the United States about the middle class living in their vehicles outside the city. What happens in Canada always follows by about 8 to 12 years what is happening in the United States. And so we're just on the verge of our middle class living in vehicles outside the city. You've got to take me seriously. I know this is happening. I can see it coming. Whenever I travel across the country, the first thing I do is drop my stuff in the hotel, put on clothes like this, and go out into the street and talk with the people who are living there. And then I go and talk with the people who are trying to resolve it for people like you and I. And by the time that I've been in the city for 24 hours, I know more about homelessness in the city than the officials that I've gone there to talk with. We have got to have, again, a national housing strategy. We have got to have a national strategy that deals with the fact, the absolute fact, that in 1900, so a little over 100 years ago, only 4% of the world's population lived in cities. In 2012, 54% of the world's population lived in cities, and that number is growing. And there are no cities outside of the socialist nations that are actually dealing adequately with the in-migration of the world's population to cities. This is not going to change. When they take those beautiful pictures from space, you know, and they take them at night, you can see this documented by the world, where the world is lit up. And it's stunningly beautiful. And it is a wonderful thing. We all love to live in cities. Very difficult to find work outside of the city. Very difficult to educate your children outside of the city. Very difficult even to farm anymore because the farms have been bought by conglomerates. And it's not little mom and pop farms where they hire their own workers, where they hire their own stable hands, where they hire people to work in their barns. It's all done mechanically. There is no work in farming. There is no work out there. When people job in Fort Manning, Alberta. They buy a house in Vancouver or a condo in Vancouver, and they fly out for work and they fly back because they can't live an adequate life in Fort Manning. This is true all over the world. We need a government that understands this. And both the Conservative government and the Liberal government are showing us from just the materials you can see on their website that they don't get the picture of Canada in this world context of growing homelessness, of the impoverishment of the middle class. What happens in Vancouver now is, for us older ones, well, for you young ones, you're not able to buy, you're not going to be able to buy in this city. My children can't afford to buy in this city. So they rent, right? And if you're well educated, if you've got a good job, and you're in the creme de la creme of the middle class, you rent the creme de la creme of rental housing. And as you do that, everybody else in rental housing moves a step down because there isn't new rental housing you can rent. And as everybody moves a step down, the first thing that happens is the vacancy rate disappears. So it becomes terribly hard to find a place, even if you're young, even if you're in a good job, even if you're well paid, even if you're wonderful. And I look around and look, the young people who are here are la creme de la creme of the young people. And I bet you've all had trouble finding adequate housing. And as everybody moves down, people who used to be called working class move down further. And the people who are living in poverty are forced out the bottom. What we're seeing in Vancouver now is that some of the people who actually work in some of the best restaurants in Vancouver can be found sleeping in the streets at night. And I don't know how that makes you feel about your dinner, but I don't want the person that's working in my kitchen to be sleeping behind a dumpster. Okay? And it's gradually moving up. People that are working in BC Place, some of them are sleeping outside. It creeps, and then all of a sudden, it's there, right? We have to have a strategy that looks at this as a national problem in an international setting and starts coming up with realistic, immediate solutions because we're in a crisis. Okay. Having said that, I want to tell you why I'm voting for Constance. I've been a friend of Constance for a little over 5 years. grabbing for every single thing that every single one of you has learned. She's hungry for everything that you can tell her. Everything that is wrong now, everything that was wrong in the past, but everything that you have seen work, because she's solutions focused. I've watched her very closely working on Park Board, and I've been with her when it's hard to have a conversation, because she's returning calls and emails to people who didn't vote for her. She's solving problems for people who had never dreamed of voting for her. And you know what that's done? Is shift an entire population so they all vote for her now. She got the highest number of votes in the Park Board. And the next time she ran, after coming back from something that would have served most population, most politicians, she increased her vote massively. This is a woman who is extremely popular already in Vancouver Centre, who has people who know her name, and know her name as a person who actually responds to what's happening to them, whether they vote for her or not. And because of that, we can trust her to get the highest votes in Vancouver Centre. She's somebody who can respectfully and lovingly take on Hetty Pratt. I don't want in this election or in any election ever to hear anybody's mouth trashing Hetty Pratt. She doesn't deserve it. Okay? She has done incredibly good work for this community. Unfortunately, much of that isn't current. But Hetty has, a friend of mine describes it as an albacore around her neck. Right? Hetty has to carry the policies of the Liberal Party, and that's a real handicap. Whereas Constance is set free, and what is around her neck is the lovely blue collar of the NDP. So everybody knows this woman.
Thank you very much. Very, very humbling to listen to Judy Drake, who I've admired for so many years. We do have a very honest relationship, and it is very real. But to hear her perception, her thoughts, and her gracious words, it is very, very humbling. I would say one of the things that I love that she said is, I don't have all the answers. The folks in this room are the answers. You are the people that have lived through things that I have not lived through. You are able to teach me. I am so open and willing to sit and listen and learn. And that's what I've learned with the 6 years at Park Board, is I talk to people that tell me, and they let me know that too. But the fact that I respond to them and talk to them, and many times I'm able to help them, that's where I learn. And sometimes they might not vote for me again, but if I'm able to still reach out and respond, that's part of my job as an elected. And I have learned a huge amount. Before I forget, because I might afterwards, is one of the things I've learned is that we're talking about the social housing, is there's 92, thanks to Thor, wherever Thor is, 92 co-ops in the writing of Vancouver Centre.
At least, there's probably some off the radar.
Yeah, yeah, and thank you so much for that work. I have talked to people in co-ops that are, many of them have been there for 15, 17, 20 years, and they're seniors that are not sleeping. They are having anxiety and panic attacks at night because in 2017, all the subsidies will be taken away. The Conservative government has decided no more subsidies. So I'm going into people's homes that literally they're not sleeping. They don't know. You talk about being displaced and a housing strategy. What are we going to do with these thousands and thousands and thousands of people, Canadians, Vancouver Centerites, that are not going to have homes? Because that, you mark my words, that will go to market rate, that will go to market rental. Which is Vancouver Centre, you're looking at $1,200 to $1,500. So without subsidies, they will have nowhere to live. That is very, very important to me, and I'm working on how to address that. And I just wanted to bring that up because I do go into these homes and you do talk to people that when they look at you and they're so desperate. And sadly enough, many of them wanted to come out and support and get a membership, but they couldn't afford the $10. So that's also something where their income is so fixed, their budget is so fixed and so tight that they can't even think from day to day. They're laying at night going, now what am I going to do? What am I going to do? So, and if you have any disability or you're on medical or you have to buy prescription drugs, it's just out of the question to relocate. And many of them as well, it's isolation. They have friends in these places. And they're like, well, these are my only friends. These are the people I know. Why would I have to move at this time in my life? This is my home. These are my family. So it's that very frightening part of this job when you go in and it's so big. It's like this umbrella, kind of, dark umbrella over Canada right now. So with that being said, again, thank you so much, Judy. Thank you so much. You keep me humble. And now I'm going to ask you to come on up and say some words. And I love this because it's not, I have to say, it's really not all about these. These are people that teach me, that support me, but also help me to know what are the issues. And that's why I thought, not just having me talk away, and then I want to open it up to the floor, and I want to have you share as well, because it's a community effort. So come on up, Rick. Yay, Rick.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all. I'm Rick Leonovich. I'm a director for the Vancouver Pride Society. I'm actually their secretary. I'm a very vocal person. Most of the time I don't even need this because I'm quite loud. I've been through a lot in the last 4 years. I was married to my partner for 15 years. He passed away from lung cancer. After he passed away, my kidneys went, I had what they call cancer in my lower back. So I had to go through chemotherapy and radiation for 1 year. And during that period, my kidneys shut down. And when my partner passed away, my kidneys came back in full shock. It was almost like my body went into shock. And I had all this support from the community, and I didn't know how in my life to try and give back. So I went to my social work at the St. Paul's Hospital, and they had mentioned that why don't you volunteer for a nonprofit agency to give back to the community? So I thought that's a great idea, because I was lonely, didn't have much for friends, we were very private. The Vancouver Pride Society welcomed me with full arms. I worked in the office 5 days a week, 4 hours a day, just to become more confident in myself again and to rebuild a life to meet more friends. And during that period, I met a lot of friends. Just to this day, I have 1,015 friends on Facebook, literally from just me coming out, being more friendly. I met the wonderful Constance during that period. I know a lot of DLAs. I'm very friendly, very approachable. My only concern, I'm 51 years old, and since I'm on disability, I'm worried if they start taking away our disability pensions. I don't know how I can go back to work full time. I mean, I know I'm young. I can only do so much work at a time. I get tired very, very easy. The doctors have told me, unfortunately, for what you've been through, they're worried worried that my kidneys may shut down again. I can't have a full-time job. So that's my way of giving back is by volunteering for Pride in order to, you know, get out, meet new people. So I was thinking that there are many things, especially with seniors, because I'm 51 now. I'm worried that when I become 65 years old, the housing in Vancouver will be skyrocketed. I won't be able to afford to live here. I don't know where I'm going to be able to work or live. I may have to move to Surrey or Newton. That's not an excuse. Vancouver needs to figure out a great way to keep people happy and healthy here in Vancouver, especially the elderly, because they have lived here for years. Who wants to have somebody after 45 to 50 years move to another place when then this is considered their home? They should feel safe, well looked after. I have a wonderful idea. I've been talking to the community. They have an idea of having a welcoming community home. It's like where it's for all generations, regardless of race, gender, age, that where people can stop in, be friendly, play games, have a place to shower, especially for people to be able to cook. And there are a lot of people that love to cook. That might be their way of getting out of the house, be presentable to the community, the youth to learn from the elderly, because this is where we get our experience. So I thought if we have a huge community center, even for housing as well, because people may not be able to afford to living on the street. Because the building that I live in, I see like 50 people on the street that I know that are friendly and able to work, but they don't have a job. So then I was thinking, I remember being in Europe, in Sweden. They pay the people that are on the street. They give them a costume or uniform. They're nicely dressed, they shower and meal. This is their way of giving back. The streets are never dirty. They're always clean, whether it's twice a day that they do it. There's no homeless, or very little. Why can't Vancouver be the same way? I really don't understand that. Now, the other thing that really upsets me the most is me becoming a senior. How are we going to be able to live here in Vancouver? I mean, the senior, your disability or your senior pension are so low. Even the cost of food and going out for dinner with your friends, it's so expensive. I mean, how can people live? And like Constance has mentioned that in the year 2017, we may not have much of a subsidy. Where are we going to move? And how are we going to live? I can understand why people have high anxiety, because I do. I have on medication that keeps me very calm, cool, and collected, because I worry about things like that, because I don't know what I'm going to be able to do. Where am I going to go? I'm going to have to live with my parents, because they're older than I am. Right? They're probably in the same place that we are. It might be something that Vancouver Centre can go back to the government and say, we need to fix this now, before it gets too late. Because 2017, we may not have housing. Today, walking up the street, I noticed the new condominium that's built here where the church was. I was shocked. I've lived here for almost 30 years. In 15 years, I've hardly been down this area. I couldn't believe this huge condo went straight up. Where's the social housing? In this area, there's so many condos in this area that there are no social housing for people, whether regardless of their age or seniors or their gender or race. This should not be an issue in Vancouver. We should be safe and feel welcomed. Because I don't feel like I'm welcomed here in Vancouver anymore. I'm going to have to move to Surrey, Newton, or Corona, Kansas. This is my home for 30 years. I don't want to move. Would you? Would you really want to move? After you've lived here for so long, and then find your rent goes, that doesn't make sense. Why? For the corporate? They don't think of that when they come about it. Now, there are some groups out there, one that's called Aging with Pride Seniors Network, and there's also a group called Gay and Grey. These are wonderful areas where you can meet people and give your ideas. I would suggest that we come up with a committee within the community here, go back to Constance, and then she can represent us on our behalf. That's a wonderful idea. We can get ideas and then go force the government saying, okay, all these people have an idea. I'm the spokesperson. I'm going to represent you and take it further. And then if it doesn't go any further from there, strike the community stronger and then make the city and the province and Canada more aware of what's happening. Now, I know heard from Aging with Pride. Vancouver Pride actually has an event for the elders. And what they do is they try and get ideas to find out why they don't feel like they're welcomed, or what's their problem, if they're having problems, whether it's regarding funding. I don't believe in charging people. If they can't afford it, so be it. It should be a sliding scale, whatever you can afford to do. If you can't afford it, I'm not going to turn you away. And that should be the same thing for food things. People cannot afford the food out there, they should never go hungry. I have a bunch of friends that I hang out with at the pool. There are some people that cannot afford a meal. I will cook them dinner. Even though I'm on disability, I will do what I can to make sure that you have a full meal at that table, regardless of what we look like or how much we can afford to do. No one should ever go hungry. Now our health care, this is another thing that really upsets me. It is so expensive. I mean, how can people afford health care? And if you're on a disability, so most of it is covered, but there are some pills that you still have to pay for. And of course, Safeway or Lunch Drugs, they will up the cost of the service charge so high that you still can't afford it. So what do? You don't take the pills. And of course your health gets very ill. I just recently had a kidney stone underneath my middle hip, and we had no idea that they were there. My whole body went into shock, and I had no idea. I damn near died. And I thought, you know what? For me to go through that, I believe in what they call positive thinking. If I can fix this, I will do it. It's like smoking. After 30 years, I quit smoking at the spur of the hat. I said, that's it, no more. It's mental thinking. And I believe in what they call moving forward. And Constance, you are moving forward. We are now at the point where everything is the same. Why change when we don't have to? We need to change. And having the youth and the younger people coming in, new ideas, fresh ideas, so be it. And Constance, I'm a pleasure to be my friend, because I believe we will do the changes that we need in Vancouver Central.
Okay, so I'm going to talk here for a little bit, and then, and thank you, Rick, that's great. I keep hearing the same thing over and over, that it's moving things forward. So definitely a lot of change. I just want to talk a little bit about the park board and what I've learned being an elected, and some of the great work that I think that we've done at the park board. Number one, I was listening to you about your smoking, that we put forward no more smoking on the beaches, in our parks, in our playgrounds. So, and that was tough. That was a change that we thought, oh boy, we're either going to get support or we're going to go down for this one. Because people that smoke like to have their cigarettes, and what we found is the number one thing is Vancouver Park Board is all about your health and your wellness, being active, green spaces, and the environment. So the fact that we were cleaning up, sometimes you're looking at $100,000 worth, $100,000 a year worth of pickup and cleanup for cigarettes and cigarette butts. Things like the animals, the birds that would be picking them up on our beaches. After events that we would have on our beaches, we would go and we have these big machines that grate through the sand, and you're picking up cigarette butts. You've got children in playgrounds picking up cigarette butts and putting them in their mouths. So it was one of those things that we thought, okay, we're going to go for it, and we decided to put forward a policy: no more smoking on beaches and parks. So I'm very, very proud of that. I shared a story earlier, and it was about the early care and learning and child care. For myself, being a single mother, it was really difficult. My little one, J-Mo and Dylan, and trying to get out and find work, and having nowhere to bring my children that I could afford. So at that time, I was on social assistance. I left an abusive situation, which was very, very difficult, and then I am very honest about my history. So I was in an abusive situation, and it's very hard to leave. So that is one of those things that I've learned too. As a woman, for whatever reason, you just get kind of used to being talked down to, or used to the abuse, and you become almost numb to it. And what happened for myself is I thought, it was my family that was very supportive, saying, you need to do something about it. So when I moved out with my children, I ended up on social assistance. And it was painful. It was painful in the sense that we had a home, We rented though. We had 2 cars. The children were in French immersion school. They had nice clothes. We had food. They took ballet. They took, karate, all those things that the kids do. And all of a sudden you're standing in a lineup with people with a big tandem stroller with my 2 children. It was degrading. It was degrading. And, I remember standing in the lineup with my kids in this big tandem stroller and waiting in the lineup with my ticket for my number to finally see a social worker. And these were actually in the days when you got to see a social worker. That has also been taken away. The budget, they've just taken this away, so there's no face-to-face anymore. So I go in and I sit and I tell her my story. And I talk to her about the abuse. And I talk to her about the addiction. And I talk to her about my children. And I talk to her about the child care. And she'd get me to fill out paper after paper after paper after paper. And then I would go back to where I was staying and they'd say, we'll call you. And I said, well, I don't have a phone. The place I was staying, I didn't have a phone and I couldn't afford a phone. So then it's a matter of finding a phone booth to try and go on phone to make sure, and of course it goes to phone message, and nobody's